This recording was produced by Oregon Trail Baptist Church. If you'd like to get more recordings, or to leave your feedback, please visit us at www.otbchurch.com or write us at P.O. Box 298, Guernsey, Wyoming 82214. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope that today's recording will not just challenge your thinking, but will transform your life.
All right, Exodus 18 this morning. We are finishing up last week's handout. Okay. Okay, same lesson as last week. Looks like this. Does anybody need a copy? I know you do. You got it? All right. It's got the... that's it. There you go. Yep, Jethro's visit. Yep. So I was listening to a podcast this morning about this chapter, and so kind of getting back into a little bit of the debate with where Mount Sinai is. I know we haven't spent a lot of time on that, and I don't tend to. But those who think Mount Sinai is all the way over in Midian, across the Gulf of Agaba, one of the problems for that position is actually in this chapter. And that's because at the beginning of chapter 18, it says, "When Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, and that the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt, then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her back, and her 2 sons, of which the name of the one was Gershom, for he said, I've been alien in the land. And the other name was Eleazar, verse 4. Let me jump down. Verse 5. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife unto Moses in the wilderness, where he encamped at the mount of God. All right, so they're at the mount of God. So Rephidim here, they are in the vicinity of Sinai. If Jethro has to leave Midian and come to Sinai to visit Moses at the Mount of God, then the mountain can't be in Midian because Jethro had to leave Midian to get there. So that does present a challenge for that position. So anybody who says they know exactly where Mount Sinai is, I think so, because if we go back to when Moses was there with the burning bush, we get the language of it being the Mount of God there. So, but yeah, it's one of those that if anybody says conclusively, we know for sure where it is, it's like, okay, well, you might have a really good idea, a good thought, but and you might be right, but there's some other issues that we have to be worked through. So anyway, all that being said, let's jump in here. We'll start this morning. We are on the second page of the handout. We'll start with verse 13 and read from there to the end of the chapter, and then finish this handout and jump into this week's. Exodus 18, starting with verse 13. And it came to pass on the morrow that Moses sat to judge the people. And the people stood by Moses from the morning unto the evening. And when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did to the people, he said, What is this thing that thou doest to the people? Why sittest thou thyself alone? And all the people stand by thee from morning unto evening. And Moses said unto his father-in-law, Because the people come unto me to inquire of God. When they have a matter, they come to me, and I judge between one and another. And I do make them know the statutes of God and his laws. Morning, come on in. Verse 17. And Moses' father-in-law said unto him, The thing that thou doest is not good. Thou wilt surely wear away, both thou and this people that is with thee. For this thing is too heavy for thee. Thou art not able to perform it thyself alone. Hearken now unto my voice, and I will give thee counsel, and God shall be with thee. Be thou for the people to Godward, that thou mayest bring the causes unto God. And thou shalt teach them ordinances and laws, and shalt show them the way wherein they must walk, and the work that they must do. Verse 21, Exodus 18, verse 21. Moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, and rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10. And let them judge the people at all seasons. And it shall be that every great matter they shall bring unto thee, but every small matter they shall judge. So shall it be easier for thyself, and they shall bear the burden with thee. If thou shalt do this thing, and God command thee so, then thou shalt be able to endure. And all this people shall go to their place in peace. So Moses hearkened to the voice of his father-in-law, and did all that he had said. And Moses chose able men out of all Israel, and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s. And they judged the people at all seasons. The hard cases they brought unto Moses, but every small matter they judged themselves. And Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went his way into his own land. I.e., again here, he left, and they're at the mountain of God. He left there, so the Mount Sinai can't be in Midian exactly. So again, we were talking about how this chapter is one of the reasons it's a problem for the Midian view of Mount Sinai. Not that I'm totally against that view. There's some stuff that really leans that way, but there's just issues with the location of Sinai. All right, so we are jumping in here. First part of this lesson, we covered the meeting with Jethro and the encounter back and forth there. Here we have Jethro the next day, after having a meal with Moses and some of the elders and leaders of Israel. He observes what Moses is doing. And what's the picture we get of how Moses is running or administering Israel? He's doing it all. You know, he's the CEO, he's the judge, he's the accountant. Okay, maybe not all that stuff, but he's every matter is coming to him, and Jethro sees this, and he's like, this isn't good. This is not a good way to lead. This is going to wear out, his response is that it's going to wear out Moses and wear out the people. So in verses 14 to 23 here, he gives advice. Overall, he's saying this is too much for you, Moses. He's warning that Moses would become exhausted, but also the people would be worn out as they wait for their turn to present their cases. Now, is this not just a reality and a truth, whether Jethro said this or not? If one person does everything, yes, they wear out, but how is it that the other people wear out? Okay, they're waiting their turn. How long is it going to take to get your turn? You remember the DMV, or Department of Motor Vehicles, for years has been known as, in fact, it made it into a movie in the last few years. It was an animal movie, and they have the sloth working at the Department of Transportation where you get your license, and the sloth is slowly doing everything. And we know that comes from, the kids don't get it, other than they think it's funny because they're slow. But as adults, we remember where it might take you all day going to get your driver's license done, because you sit there and you wait and you wait. Now that's not because one person's doing it, that's because of government inefficiency, all right? And my experience, that has gotten way better over the years. However, if one person is doing everything for everybody, and you have to wait and wait and wait to get your answer and your thing resolved, you get antsy and waiting. And how well are the people doing at this point when they have to wait for something? They grumble and complain. So this is a recipe for disaster. Moses is serving as a mediator between the people and God. He's explaining God's laws to them, but he's also helping them judge and discern between disputes. In Jethro's advice, Moses' role here doesn't change. Did Moses, in establishing these other people to do it, did he lose his position of judge? No. What did he do instead of losing it? He delegated, right? So you have the easy things, or the things that are clear, he can be taken care of long before they ever work up the chain to Moses. So it takes a lot off his plate. Is there any other benefit to that system? Okay, you have a multitude of counselors, but they're not really advising him. Think of it this way. The individuals who sit and judge, do they have to know the law of God? They should, right? So you're multiplying the people who actually know what right and wrong, know what God says. You're teaching, you're spreading that out to them, and they're also actively engaged in it, which forces them to understand it more themselves. The more people get involved, the more they understand something. If you really want to know something, try teaching it. That's really where it drives in. So there's a multitude layer of benefits here. And so Moses here, he's doing a good thing in listening to Jethro. Verse 20 notes, I want to make sure I don't skip something. There's something. There's a phrase, and I don't want to. Okay, yeah, I haven't got to it yet. All right. Don't want to get ahead of myself. All right, verse 20 here. This delegation begins with what task? What is he supposed to do to these men who get appointed before they even start judging, according to verse 20? They're supposed to teach them. Okay, you don't throw someone into a position without training or teaching them, all right? So, in effect, all the cases have to be put on hold while he trains these people. But this is the beginning of a good thing, because if they learn the ways of God, they learn about the Lord and how he is and what his law is, as they're learning of him and they understand that, then they're able to judge. This isn't just them judging off what they think, or I like this guy and I don't like that guy. They're learning the laws of God before they apply the laws of God. And then in verse 21, he gives qualifications. He's looking for capable men that fear God, they're truthful, they hate covetousness, or the reason that gets lumped in is bribes. You don't want any judge who becomes a judge, and then people know that if we bring him 20, 30, 40 bucks, we can get our case to go this way instead of that way. Now, I'm going to bring this up, I don't know why. Missionaries sometimes deal with this overseas, and what I think they deal with is a little different. Were these judges making laws? No. They were just enforcing or teaching or applying God's law. Okay? So when an official overseas at the airport has no reason to stop you from getting through, but they look at your white skin and they say, no, you can't get through. And you have every legal right to get through. And you give them $10. And I'm not encouraging this. Different missionaries have taken different positions on this. But some look at it, they're greasing the system. They pay that guy $10 to get him through. It's not illegal for them to go through. They have everything they need to go through. But this person has the power to make their day miserable. And they live off these bribes, and they abuse the system time and time again. So either you literally wait all day and might get sent back home and never get to go through, even though everything legally by this government you can go through, or you give them $10 and you go through and you're done. Okay? So some view it the difference as greasing the system versus bribing them to do something wrong. All right? Now I'll leave that for you with where I don't think you deal with that as much here in America. At least I. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You're not bribing him to do wrong. You're provoking him to love and good works with a $10 bill, or maybe a $20. But anyway, I don't know why that came to mind, but it did. All right, so he sets up a structure. There's rulers of thousands, hundreds, 50s, tens. So this is a spread out structure. I will say there's a lot of discussion actually on this, and it's a bit complicated. There seems to be a distinction between those who get set up here as judges and those who are elders of Israel. And it seems there's an overlap at times, and then there's a distinction at times. Not that our American system is very close to this system, but do our judges in the American court system, do they make any laws? No, they're not supposed. Yeah. Yeah, that's about. They're not supposed to really be making or writing laws. Who writes the laws? Okay, so you got Congress, you've got the House of Representatives, and you got the Senate, and they write the laws, and you got this whole system. The judges are part of that. Now, in the last 20 years, has there been somewhat of a merging? Yes, where maybe there shouldn't have been. So this is the system, and this system gets totally rearranged and readjusted when kings come into the picture. And there's been whole dissertations on how this works, of which I don't even pretend to understand it. However, I'll say this. The judges and the elders of Israel don't seem to be the same group. You had elders, and this gets even more complicated. You had elders of cities, elders of tribes, and you had elders of the nation. Okay, so you have different levels of elders and over what. And you say, well, why do you bring any of this up? Okay, there's a lot of churches today that are looking back into the Old Testament, and specifically they're trying to prop up an idea of elder rule in churches. Okay, and they pull up these Old Testament passages about the elders, like this one, and they see, this is how it's designed, this is how it works, and it's like they never stop to look at the context in the Old Testament and how, okay, well, you have different elders happening at different things going on here, and you can't all apply that to how the church is run either. So I'm not saying that's a conclusive evidence against it, but it's a very popular thing, and they're just not very careful with the text when they do that. So anyway, number 3 here, Jethro predicts the impact of spreading out the work. So he's predicting this will go well, it will be successful, it will thrive and prosper. Also, you could read this and get that sense that this is all Jethro's idea. And in one sense, it's Jethro's idea. But verse 23 gives us a phrase that's helpful to bring into the picture. If thou do this thing, and God command thee so, then thou shalt be able to endure. What does Jethro mean when he says to Moses, if God command thee so? Okay, so Jethro's throwing out this idea, and is this a wise decision? Wise idea? Yeah, it's a good, wise idea. But he's putting it under the position of, if God is behind this, this is what will happen. So we see even, if this was Jethro's conversion, we see him just right off the bat as he's encouraging and giving wisdom to Moses. Not that, beforehand he didn't have any wisdom. But the point is he's even in what we might call earthly wisdom. He's yielding that over to the Lord if this is what God wants and God decides. So I think that's an important phrase in this chapter. Otherwise, this whole chapter can seem very much man-centered, of just trusting Jethro. He's been around the block. He knows he's been a priest in Midian, so he's just bringing in that stuff in here. He submits it to the Lord. And Douglas Stewart notes, he said, what he expected of Moses was the willingness to ask Yahweh if such an approach represented his divine will. Now we can assume Moses did so. We don't necessarily read that in the text. But God does seem to bless this effort. God seems to use it. And so we can assume Moses did. By spreading out the labor, Moses would be allowed to endure. The people would go home in peace. They would not be grumbling and complaining and irritated and upset and picking up stones to throw Moses. Verses 24 to 26 gives us the description of Moses putting the plan into practice. And then in verse 27, Jethro departs. Comments, questions as we finish out that lesson? Any thoughts there? Again, this is a transition chapter 219, where we're getting to Sinai and putting all the pieces together there. So